So apparently the U.S. is shifting their policy to allow the Cuban government more freedom. Not only are they putting an embassy there, they're also trying to lift the embargo, and I'm sitting there going, okay, so not only is the U.S. sending a message that anti-Semitism is completely okay, also more oppression of the Cuban people is okay. And not only that, Alan Gross has the nerve to say that he supports the president. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so you were in Cuba for all those years, you were horrendously treated to the point where you lost 2 front teeth and pretty much everything else that you could lose, and you're saying that you support the executive branch's way of saying to Cuba, hey, you can treat Jews and Cubans worse. I'm like, let me put it this way, if Masada 2000 still had their list up, Alan Gross would be right there with the ones who signed the Oslo Accords and who were, well, not necessarily signed the Oslo Accords, but supported the Oslo Accords despite that they had been kidnapped. And people can say, well, that was Stockholm Syndrome, just like people are saying about Alan Gross right now. Well, he's saying what he has to say because it's pikuach nefesh, to save a life. I'm like, okay, now Alan Gross is free. He has no obligation to support what the U.S. government is doing. He doesn't have to say anything to support the Cuban government either. He can do the right thing and say, look, even if this gets me killed, and sadly, even if this gets others killed, I'm going to say what I need to say. If I were Alan Gross, I would say, yes, the Cuban government treated me horrendously. Yes, they're treating especially Cuban Jews horrendously. Yes, they are treating other Cuban nationals horrendously, or rather Cuban citizens, since the discussion about who ethnic Cubans are, again, is a whole nother discussion, and ethnicity and nationality traditionally equate, although again, that's another discussion. Point being, Alan Gross, for lack of a better term, really dropped the ball on this one, and there's just nothing else to say. And meanwhile, the European Union has decided to take Hamas off of the terror list. The UN is backing the so-called Palestinians and trying to give them more land, and, well, I guess in one sense, Netanyahu, whether or not he realizes it, accomplished his old goal of giving 86% of the West Bank to the so-called Palestinians. Heck, if he couldn't do it, the UN picked up where he left off, so it looks like Netanyahu was able to, for lack of a better term, Netanyahu was able to get his parting shot in, whether or not he realized that, which is kind of scary. And I think that's part of why the UN did it too. They were like, look, this Netanyahu guy had tried to give 86% of the West Bank before anyway. He's going out. We may as well give him his parting shot, since he had tried to hurt Israel before. And now that Israel is holding these elections, why don't we actually support this Netanyahu guy and do what he couldn't do for once? And I mean, people might say, well, that's conspiratorial, but now that Netanyahu is actually leaving and Israel is trying to be freer, the UN is saying, well, dang, so when Netanyahu is actually doing stuff that hurt us all, we didn't fully support him, but now that he's leaving, we can take over the reins ourselves and hurt us all. And that's just very scary, but that's what tends to happen. And so again, we're seeing unfortunately a self-hating Jew in Alan Gross. We're seeing Netanyahu inadvertently getting his parting shot. We're seeing the so-called Palestinians being supported by the European Union, and of course the so-called Palestinians including Hamas. And it's just very scary, and oi, And unfortunately, what seemed like a Hanukkah miracle with Alan Gross being freed is now backfiring on us, because Alan Gross is saying, hey, not only do I support what happened to me, I support others getting hurt. And of course, the same so-called Palestinians and the same Hamas that just got taken off the terror list are also laughing as they say, see, this Alan Gross guy supports us too, and they support our friends in anti-Semitic governments such as Cuba. So, wow, I mean, wow, this is really scary. By the way, for those who follow the Karaite calendar, Hanukkah doesn't start till tomorrow evening. However, on Erev Hanukkah, and then, of course, the day before Erev Hanukkah, all this is happening, so it's like, wow, just a bunch of paradoxes, irony. You'd think in this season of life more miracles would happen, but for lack of a better term, apparently not, or at least what we don't see as miracles. Only God knows what's going on and why what's going on is going on. Man, I can say that nonetheless, I'm still trying to understand it, and I'm sure that many people are. Well, that's my take on it, and despite all the circumstances, Erev Hanukkah Tov, Erev Hanukkah Tov, and for those who are already celebrating, Hanukkah Tova.